All right, welcome back to another episode of the Podium Pusher podcast. We are back. It has been a while. Brandon, I missed you last week. How you doing?
Doing great. Yeah, it was a good week. Missed you too. I think you were having a lot more fun than I was, but uh, but yeah, I'm glad to be back. Recording another episode together.
A lot of episodes on our own over the past week, but we are back together predicting the Australian Grand Prix. First time in the season that we had an off week between Formula One races, and it just didn't feel right. I missed it this past week. I'm glad we're back.
Yeah, me too. It'll be another for us. It'll be another Saturday race, technically. But yeah, the Australian Grand Prix is a fun one to watch, and it has felt kind of weird not having races to watch on Sundays the past couple of weeks. But yeah, I'm excited that it'll be back, and that we didn't have one last week. Feels good to have, more anticipations built up. It's just more exciting. So yeah.
I have to fight that internal battle again of should I stay up until midnight to see the beginning of the Australian Grand Prix, or should I go to bed and just watch it the next morning? I'll probably go to bed, let's be honest. But doesn't mean I'm not excited for the Australian Grand Prix.
Yeah. We both love our sleep. I've tried to stay up in the past, and it just haven't quite made it. So probably not worth it to stay up and fall asleep watching the race, and then wake up 2 hours later to hear Will Buxton talking about the results, and then it spoils it for myself. It's happened a couple times, but
Yeah, well, I mean, last year I stayed up to watch the Australian Grand Prix because I was in college, didn't have anything going on, I guess. And then the whole red flag thing happened. So it's like 2 a.m. and I was like, I'm already this invested. Like, I'm going to be tired tomorrow morning when I get up for church, no matter what. So I've got to,
yeah.
and then there were two red flags, the whole penalty thing. It took forever to finish that race. I was like, what am I doing? I didn't go to bed until like 2:45. So maybe I've learned my lesson from last year. I'm probably not going to stay up for the Australian Grand Prix. But we're not talking about last year's Australian Grand Prix. We're talking about this year's Australian Grand Prix. We've got some predictions to make, overview of things we think are going to happen. We're going to start with pole position. What's your prediction for pole position for the Australian Grand Prix?
My prediction for pole position is going to be Max Verstappen. Max was on pole last year, and his time was 1:16.732. And he's been really good in qualifying this year so far in the first two races. Ferrari's been really close, but I think Max has still got it for one more race at least. And my extra prediction on top is his time is going to be a 1:16.550. He's going to go a little bit faster than last year. So we'll see, but I'm feeling good about it.
I love when we make these pole position predictions and we've thrown out these times. We have no idea what the time is going to be.
Yeah.
Like,
No
sure,
clue.
they're going to get faster than last year. We're recording this on a Monday. We won't even see cars on track until Friday. We have no idea what it's going to be, but who knows? One of these weeks we're going to be right. Before I make my prediction, I want it to be known that in my heart, I know Max Verstappen is going to get pole position, but for the sake of being different, and if it's right, I'm going to say I knew it all along and just cover all my bases. That's what this whole section is right here. But I think Charles Leclerc is going to get pole. I think he is really the only person in qualifying so far that has looked to be any kind of threat to Max Verstappen. And by threat, I mean within like 0.3 of a second, which is still a massive gap. Don't get me wrong. But I think for the sake of being different, if you had to pick someone other than Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc seems like the guy. He's on an incredible streak of front row starts. He'll probably keep that going, even if he doesn't get pole position. Say his time is going to be a 1:16.462. That is an incredibly random number, but if I'm already going out there, put Charles Leclerc on pole, might as well pick a random pole time. If I get them both right, I'm going to go buy a lottery ticket or something. But Charles Leclerc is my pole prediction for the Australian Grand Prix.
Yeah, I think if you look at Charles, I mean, his qualifying is fantastic, and I think that he is potentially the best qualifier on the grid. His race pace seems to suffer in relation to his qualifying, but I mean, he grabbed the most pole positions besides Max Verstappen last year. He was the guy who was beating Max, if anyone was, in qualifying last year. So I think Charles is a great pick if we're not going to pick Max, but we'll see. I think those are the two guys who have a shot. So
Yeah, I don't know if Charles' race pace suffers or if that Ferrari's race pace suffers. Maybe a little combination of both.
Yeah.
Uh, talk about our podium predictions. Third place, who you got?
Third place. Okay, so this is again kind of on the same vein that you just said. I think it will probably be the two Red Bulls and a Ferrari on the podium. But I desperately want someone other than Red Bull or Ferrari to be on the podium. So with that being said, my third place prediction is Lando Norris. Lando had a good race last weekend. McLaren looked certainly stronger last weekend than they did in Bahrain. Australia has a lot of quick corners, similar to Saudi Arabia. So trying to just piece things together. Maybe something crazy will happen like last year. Maybe Lando will sneak into third place. So that's my official prediction.
Yeah, I desperately want McLaren to end up on the podium. I think based on how they finished last year, we're kind of surprised that they haven't ended up on the podium yet, but it's only 2 races in. I think Australia, there's a chance. I think back to 2022 when it was Daniel and Lando in the car, and that car was still terrible at the beginning of 2022, and then they threw out a 6th and a 7th in that Australian Grand Prix that year. Like Australia is a good track for McLaren, so we might see an uptick in performance for him. My third place prediction, I'm going to give this man some respect because we haven't predicted him for anything this year. Sergio Perez, third place. I feel like it's safe, especially if I'm predicting Charles to be on pole. Then Sergio might not get that P2 slot. Maybe he'll get P3 when it comes to the race. But I'm going to say, he started the year off with 2 podiums. Got to give him some respect. I'm cautiously giving him this prediction because I think the fall off is coming. This is where it's all started last year. That Q1 exit last year, that began it all. So who knows what's going to happen when we show up to Australia this year. But based on his current form right now, I got to give Sergio Perez some respect. Put him in third place.
Yeah, that's true. We've kind of been dogging on Sergio a lot on the podcast so far this year, but up to this point, he's done everything Red Bull has asked him to do, and maybe even exceeded expectations a little bit. I don't know if that says more about Sergio or more about the expectations that were placed on him. But yeah, he's had a good season so far, but the fall off is coming. Probably good to get him in a prediction now before fall off happens, and then no predictions are good predictions for Sergio. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
This could be the one and only time that Sergio Perez is in a podium prediction all year long in the fastest car on the grid. But he's the one who put the expectations on himself with his performances last year. It's not on me. I didn't do this. I didn't make him miss Q3 for like 14 races in a row last year. I didn't do that. He did that. That's all his fault. All right. Second place. I have a feeling we've got the same driver. Who do you have?
Charles Leclerc. I think he has done well so far this season. And I think out of the 2 Ferraris, I think he'll be the stronger one this weekend. I guess technically we don't know who's going to be in that second Ferrari yet officially, but all signs point to signs. That was a silly joke, though. Not a great joke. You guys don't have to laugh at that. But yeah, it should be Carlos Sainz in the car. And I think on the recovery from his surgery, I think Charles will have the edge on him. So
I also have Charles Leclerc for second place. I think you're right. I think whoever is the second driver in that car, whether it be an almost full health Carlos Sainz or Ollie Behrman making his second start at another very unique track, I think Charles will be the faster Ferrari. I don't see why Ferrari wouldn't continue to be the second fastest car on the grid. So I think Charles Leclerc second place is a very, very safe prediction. Glad we both locked it in. First place, it can be no one else. Who is it?
Speaking of safe predictions, we've got Max Verstappen in first place. Just continue to expect him to tear it up. I think Max did well in Australia last year. And yeah, there's no reason to believe that he won't do well again this weekend. So, yeah.
I agree. Have Max Verstappen in first place. He walked away at the beginning of Australia last year. First red flag. He clears him again at the start immediately. Second red flag, clears him again at the start immediately. I mean, Max is just a robot. Every single lap is the same. Every single start is the same. There's no reason to think Max Verstappen wouldn't win this race, even if my prediction somehow comes true and he's not on pole position. He'll probably lead from turn one anyways and get the win. It's tough making these predictions every week. You want to see something else, but hey, it's still Formula One. Cars are still on track. Got to enjoy it. Max Verstappen first place is a pretty safe prediction from us, but it's probably going to come true.
I will say, last year he did have that spin. I guess it wasn't really a spin, a front lockup towards the very end of the race. I don't know, it was probably like lap 50 or something, where he locked up his front tires in turn 13, went into the grass a little bit, almost lost the race for him, but he still won. So I think that was Max's lone blemish last season.
Yeah, so maybe the last mistake he's made.
Yeah. It's been like 365 days since the last mistake. Max has got that in his trailer. Yeah, maybe I don't know.
I think Yas has that side in Max's trailer, keeping track of it for him.
Yeah, probably. He's probably more concerned about it than Max is, to be honest with you. Yas is concerned about everything else. He's concerned about the team, about everything else. Max is just concerned about driving and having fun.
All right, a couple other things to look out for in the Australian Grand Prix. Kind of already mentioned this, but Carlos Sainz had his appendix removed. Appendix? I don't know why I said that. Anyways, had his appendix removed last weekend. Did not participate in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Filled in by Ollie Behrman, who did a wonderful job in that Ferrari. Everyone said that they wanted Carlos to be back in the car by Australia. Alex Albon had his appendix removed and he was in the car for the next race in Singapore. So I think all signs point to Carlos Sainz, like you said. But how good will he be? Will he be at his full health? What do you think this weekend's going to look like for Carlos Sainz?
I think it'll be a strong weekend from him. I don't know that he'll be fighting for podiums. I still have my appendix in there somewhere floating around, so I don't know what it's like to recover from that kind of surgery. But yeah, I think he'll have a strong weekend. He'll make it into Q3. He'll score some points for the team, and this will probably be one of his toughest weekends physically. But I think he'll push through. And I mean, if Alex can return 2 weeks after surgery and race in Singapore, which is probably the most physically demanding race on the calendar, then Carlos Sainz can do it too. So
yeah, I expect him to be in the car this weekend. If he was in the paddock walking around like 12 hours after his surgery last weekend, I'm sure he's going to be fighting to get in the car this weekend. Speaking of Singapore, Carlos won that race last year, and so he knows what it's like to perform under some physical turmoil. So I'm sure he'll be in some pain. I mean, last weekend he did free practice 1 and 2 on the Thursday with his appendix messing up inside his body. He's done some Formula One racing with that side pain and just overall unwell. So I expect him to be in the car. I'm sure he'll do fine. He might, lose a little bit of maximum performance, but still one of the best drivers on the grid. Will probably be competing for anywhere from P3 to P5. I'd throw Carlos Sainz in there, but we'll have to wait and find out this weekend.
We'll see.
If Ollie Behrman is back in the car, I think he'll have a good weekend as well. I'm sure he'll be in attendance for the Grand Prix no matter what. I'm sure they'll have him on standby, which will be a valuable experience for him no matter what. But should they have to put Ollie Behrman back in the car, I would imagine that he would only get better from his performance last week and bring home another solid haul of points for Ferrari.
Yeah, I think Jeddah is it's another track that's really demanding physically because of all the high-speed corners. The drivers are, pulling a lot of G's going around those corners at hundreds of miles an hour. So if Ollie can perform that well in Saudi Arabia, if he gets another chance this weekend in an F1 car, it'll definitely be a good performance from him. I would expect him to make it into Q3. He just missed out barely last weekend. But yeah, I think it'll be a good performance if Ollie hops in the car. We'll see. F2, he'll be there no matter what, because F2 is racing in Australia this weekend. So, yeah, and if they weren't, I would expect Ferrari to have him there anyway. So
You're right. F2 is there this weekend. I'm sure he wants to be in the Formula One car, but he's sitting 10th in the Formula One standings right now with his 6 points that he got. And he's last in the F2 standings after getting pole position last weekend. He's one of the drivers we expected him to compete for the championship. I'm sure he's not super upset if he, gets these 2 weekends of Formula One racing and lands a seat in F1. I'm sure he won't be super upset about not winning the F2 championship to make that happen. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he's like, I kind of want to go back and race in my series, but I got to go race in Formula One.
yeah, I think the FIA should at least transfer. I mean, he scored 6 points last weekend. He should at least get 6 points in F2. I mean, 6 points in F1 is, I would say, worth more than 6 points in F2, but we could at least do an even transfer. That way, Ollie's not falling that far behind. I mean, he's doing more than everybody else in F2, so he should get something for it. I mean, maybe that something will be an F1 race seat. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure he'd take the F1 race seat over 6 points. Someone else who really wants to have an F1 race seat next year, Sergio Perez, out of contract. There's been much speculation about what is going to happen to his seat. He's been the second best driver this year. Well, maybe not second best driver, but he's finished second in every single race this year, which is all he can do in that Red Bull, what the team wants from him. Will he continue to be that going into this weekend? What do you think?
If you're making me choose between the two, will he hold it together? Will he not? I'm going to stay in line with my previous predictions and say something's going to happen. Fall off is starting. I don't know. I think I don't know. I just don't think he's going to continue to be able to hold the form for the entire season, and maybe this will be the first crack in the foundation this weekend. So got to line up with my previous predictions. So he was he had a decent race last year, I think, but had he not gone out and started in P20, he probably would have had a lot better race. But
yeah, I think Sergio Perez, he has shown himself on multiple occasions to be a more than capable driver, above average, very quick. He's won races in that Red Bull. He's won races over Max, fair and square in that Red Bull. I think back to Jeddah last year. He won that race, fair and square.
Yeah.
And so I think his problems have got to be mental. And he just gets in this rut. He's in his head. He thinks he has to outdrive the car. And so if there's any part of him that's like, this is where it all started to go downhill last year, I need to make sure that doesn't happen this year. And he goes back to overdriving the car and trying to do more than he has to do, then I think we'll see him start to slip back into that slump he had last year. So I think he just needs to keep it within his limits, know what the car can do, know what he can do, try and bring home another P2, maybe even a P3. I think I'd like that a little bit more. But I don't want him to get in his head and start overdriving the car again and having those same issues.
Yeah. I think it's definitely a mental battle for him. I don't know exactly what it is, but yeah, he just seems to get in his head, and I don't know if it's losing confidence or just, I think maybe, like you said, kind of just trying too hard, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if he can handle Australia.
Well, Australia does have a new track layout, not for this year. The changes were made a couple of years ago now, but they produced good racing. As soon as they made the changes, we saw an uptick in overtakes, created some more hard braking zones, added a DRS zone. Been good racing. It's better racing than we had in the past at Australia. The cars, they're getting a little hard to follow again, which is unfortunate because this was the whole reason we changed these new regulations so the cars could be closer. And then obviously the teams don't want other cars being that close, so they're doing everything they can to create dirty air off the back of their car. How do you think this track layout in Australia is going to hold up to that?
I think it'd be interesting to watch and find out, but I think it'll still continue to produce good racing. There is a lot of good overtaking zones. There's a decent amount of long straights into heavy braking zones. I think of like turn 1 and I think it's turn 13 are both good overtaking opportunities that we saw. Some cool overtakes last year. So I think it'll still continue to produce good racing, but we might see more cars get lapped than last year. And, well, I guess everybody was on the lead lap last year, technically, because of the major crash at the restart. But yeah, hopefully we'll be able to see like less cars get lapped maybe than last weekend, because I think there was 9 or 10. I don't remember. But yeah, we'll see. I think it'll still continue to produce good racing. It's a really fun track to watch racing on. So.
Yeah, I think at the very least, it's a great weekend experience. Like the vibes around Australia, the people down there know how to throw a good party for Formula One. I've said this before. I will continue to say it. Let it be the opener again. I miss it. I think it is supposed to return to being the opener in the future, which is awesome. And so, even if the race is not great, I just think, the way the event is run in Australia, it's always fun to watch qualifying there. It's usually a pretty good qualifying session. So even if the racing isn't perfect, I think it's at least going to be a fun weekend down in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. I never got to watch Australia as an opener, unfortunately. I started following F1 after that, but I think that would be cool. I like the idea of having testing at a different venue than the first race. I think it just brings a little more mystery, mystique, wonder what's going to happen kind of a thing. But I don't know. Budget cap is real, so we'll see if that ever happens again.
Let's talk about our podium pusher prediction for the weekend. Who do you think is going to have the best weekend when we show up to Australia this weekend?
I'm going to go with Fernando Alonso. Fernando had a strong weekend last weekend. He finished the race in P5, which is great. I don't know that we thought that the Aston Martin would be in that range, especially at a track like Jeddah. And Lance Stroll was having a good race until he crashed into the wall last weekend. So he had a bad race, I guess you could say, but he was in like P10 when he crashed. So I think Fernando's going to continue to get the most out of the car. I think he's settling in after the first two races. He looked much more comfortable in Saudi Arabia. So I expect him to get anywhere from like P7, P8 down to like P5. So we'll see what happens, but I think Fernando's going to have a great weekend.
I think that is a great prediction. I'm waiting on the Fernando Alonso podium this year. I'm sure he'll get at least one at some point. My podium pusher prediction is the man who replaced him at Alpine, Pierre Gasly. This is out of left field. I don't know why I'm making this prediction. I'm kind of writing off me getting a point here anyways. He's had good races in Australia in the past. I think back to last year, he was running P4 in the Alpine for the entire race before he went off at the restart and then drove it right into the side of Esteban Ocon. But, that happens, especially when you hit your teammate. But, I think he'll have a better weekend than Esteban, which is really all I'm going to need for me to say that I got this right. If he beats Esteban in qualifying in the race, that's all you can ask for. But I think he'll run either in the top 10 for a little bit or around the top 10. I'm not saying he's going to score points, but I think we will see progress from Alpine and specifically Pierre Gasly this weekend. So I'm going to say he's going to be my podium pusher.
We'll see. I don't know. I feel like that's a bit of a wild prediction, but I mean, I don't know if I would say that I would give it to you if Pierre finishes the race in P19 and qualifies P19 with Esteban behind him. So I don't know.
We'll see what the gap is. We'll see what the gap is at least. If it's a 20-second gap or best at the end of the race, then I'll try to argue it. But yeah, P19.
Okay.
I don't think you could say anyone who finishes P19 is our podium pusher. But you could say that they're our back marker of the weekend. So what's your back marker prediction?
My back marker of the weekend prediction is Esteban Ocon. He had a great weekend in Australia last year before he crashed into Pierre and destroyed both of their races. And but this car is definitely not it. And it hasn't been the first two weekends. So I don't expect Alpine to turn it around quite yet. I do expect them to turn it around somewhat eventually this season. But I mean, last weekend he was stuck behind Kevin Magnussen. Kevin was doing a great job defending to create that gap to Nico Hülkenberg for Haas to score their first point of the season. But Esteban was directly behind Kevin for quite a while in that race, and didn't really seem to be able to pass him at all. So if that's any indication of how he's going to perform, I don't think it's going to be a great weekend for Esteban. But
That's probably more of an indication of how the Alpine performs than Esteban. They got no straight line speed, no cornering speed, so he was kind of stuck behind that Haas, and that is what it is. But I mean, we're kind of on the same page here. I can give my Pierre prediction, you can get your Esteban prediction. So maybe the P19, P20, we can work something out here where both of us end up being correct. My back marker of the weekend, it pains me to say it, I predicted Daniel Ricciardo. Has not had a good start to the year, especially in qualifying, has been off the pace of Yuki in both qualifying sessions. And after qualifying in Saudi Arabia, said his pace was a bit of a mystery, which is not great because that's kind of the language that he used around his time at McLaren. And if we get into that cycle, that's not a good sign. I don't think RB's car is as similar to a Red Bull as we thought it was going to be. And Daniel, isn't feeling as natural in that car, isn't able to maximize his driving style in that car as much as we thought he was going to. He's never had a good home race in Australia. 2018, grid penalty before it even started. 2019, drove it into the grass before he even crossed the start-finish line. Disqualified from the podium in 2014. So signs aren't pointing to a great weekend in Australia for Daniel Ricciardo. Hope he does. Hope he starts to turn the season around, has a good home race before he ends up retiring at some point in the near future. But I just don't see it this weekend. Predict him as my back marker.
Yeah, it's a tough prediction to make, but I think it's probably a spot on one. It's a good one. You love to see drivers do well at their home race because it's like that's such a cool thing to be able to get to race in front of not only your home country, but your friends and family. Everybody who knows you, and is close with you from back home is probably at the race. I mean, I think it's really awesome that Logan Sargent gets to race in Miami, which is like an hour drive from where he grew up before he moved to Europe to pursue racing. But I think, I really hope Daniel has a great weekend, and I hope Oscar has a great weekend too. But Daniel does not have a good track record here, so we'll see what happens.
We will see what happens. I would take not getting that prediction right for him to have a good weekend. But some predictions that I do want to get right, the ones we're keeping track of, we are tied 2-2 right now. We've each gotten one prediction right at each of the first two rounds. So I think I've got some good predictions this weekend. I've been cooking. I've got Oscar Piastri is going to out-qualify Lando Norris. Home race, good vibes. Oscar's been having a great start to the year. I think he out-qualifies Lando Norris. And then my second prediction, and this one is really crazy, is that Mercedes scores the second most points this weekend. So whether that's Carlos Sainz in the second Ferrari, not at 100%, or Ollie Behrman in the second Ferrari, I think Mercedes will score the second most points as a constructor across this weekend.
Yeah, I think those are two great predictions. If you look back at last year's race, Mercedes actually qualified really well and raced really well. George Russell retired during the race, but at some point, both he and Lewis Hamilton did lead the race. So it'll be interesting to see if they can perform well again in Australia this year. But I think those are two solid predictions. My predictions, again, keeping in line with what I was predicting earlier, I think Sergio Perez does not finish on the podium this weekend. I think, whether that's McLaren or a Mercedes driver or both Ferraris, I think someone else is going to take that last podium spot from him. And I think it'll be one of Sergio's tougher weekends when we look back on the season. Then my second prediction, I have one of the teams in the bottom 5 of the constructors standings currently scores points this weekend. And those bottom 5 teams are Haas, Williams, Sauber, RB, and Alpine. So I think one of them is going to be finishing in the points Australia's pretty good racing. Last year, there was some crazy incidents, 2 red flags, safety cars. Alex Albon had a great weekend until he crashed out last year. He was running in like P6, I think, when he crashed out. So he was definitely on track for some points. So I feel good about that prediction. Yeah, who knows? Maybe something crazy will happen and an Australian driver will win the race, or we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, that would be awesome if Oscar Piastri guys. I'm just kidding. Oh, no. Yeah, I think that's a good prediction. I could see Alex Albon bringing home a point at this race, especially based on how he was doing last year before he crashed out. I don't think Williams has performed as well as we have wanted them to this year, but maybe based on last year, Australia is one of those tracks they understand. They'll be able to get the car into the working window and have a good weekend. And so I could see that coming true. Brandon, what are your parting podium thoughts for these lovely people before we get on out of here?
Parting podium thoughts.
We made
it for this weekend. We're back, everybody. After a long 1-week break, we're back. Nah, just kidding. But I thought about it. I seriously did think about saying that for a second. But now, yeah, I'm just excited for this weekend. Australia's a fun track. It's cool to get to watch drivers at their home races. And yeah, cars are back on track. And we have Australia and then I think China next. Is that right? Or Japan? I don't remember. But one of those are 2 races I'm excited for as well. I've never seen a race in China. Never been a Formula One fan while a race has been held there. So holding out that it doesn't get canceled at the last second like it has in the past. But yeah, I'm just excited that Formula One's back and that we're going to have a great weekend. So it'll be good.
Yep, I know we're for sure staying on that side of the world. Excited for those schedule changes. Glad Japan is earlier. Hopefully out of the rainy season, we won't have any monsoons there this year. So that will be good. And I'm sure Australia will not disappoint. Be a lovely race. Maybe we'll even see a new winner. I'm not expecting it, but maybe.
Maybe. We're truly covering all predictions in our predictions of the Australian Grand Prix.
If we just throw it all out there, something has to be correct. And then we can clip it up, put it out on social media, and we're going to act like we're geniuses.
Here we go.
And then you come listen to the full episode, like, man, these guys predicted 30 different things. Of course, one of them was going to happen. But hey, that's all right. It's not about how many you get wrong. It's about the ones you get right.
Exactly.
So, all right. Well, that is all we've got. That is our predictions for the Australian Grand Prix. Let us know your predictions and the questions on this podcast, or you can find us on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, or wherever you're listening to this lovely podcast. Go ahead and subscribe. It's free. It helps us, and we'd love for you to follow along. We put out a lot of awesome content for the 2024 Formula One season and beyond. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Podium Pusher podcast, and we will see you in the next one. Peace.
Yeah.